The blizzard came without warning, as they often did in the high country. One moment Elena was following the familiar trail back to town. The next she was stumbling through a white wall of wind and snow that erased the world around her. The temperature plummeted with each gust, and her lightweight hiking jacket, adequate for the mild autumn day she'd started with, now felt as thin as paper against the mountain's sudden fury. Her fingers had gone numb inside her gloves, and ice crystals formed on her eyelashes with each blink. The trail had vanished beneath a rapidly deepening blanket of snow, and every direction looked the same, an endless expanse of white, punctuated by the dark silhouettes of pine trees that appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the swirling storm. Elena had been photographing the fall colors along Copper Ridge when the weather turned. What started as a few innocent flakes had escalated into a full-blown mountain blizzard. In less than an hour, she'd tried to retrace her steps, but the familiar landmarks had become alien shapes in the whiteout conditions. Her phone showed no signal, not unusual at this elevation, and the GPS couldn't get a fix through the storm. As hypothermia began to set in, her thoughts grew sluggish. She knew she needed shelter, warmth, anything to get out of the killing wind. Through the storm, she caught a glimpse of something that didn't belong to nature: the sharp angles of a roof, the golden glow of lamplight through a window. A cabin. Elena stumbled toward it, her legs heavy and uncoordinated. By the time she reached the heavy wooden door, she could barely feel her feet. She pounded on it with fists she couldn't feel, calling out through chattering teeth. The door opened, and Elena found herself looking way up at the largest man she'd ever seen. He had to be nearly 7 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to span the doorframe. His beard was thick and dark, streaked with premature silver, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. For a moment, she wondered if the cold had caused her to hallucinate some mythical mountain giant. "Please," she managed through blue lips. "The storm, I'm lost." Without a word, he stepped aside and gestured her in. The warmth hit her like a wall, making her skin tingle painfully as circulation began to return. The cabin was rustic, but well-maintained, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. The flames cast dancing shadows across rough-hewn log. Walls decorated with simple furniture that looked handmade and sized for someone of his considerable stature. "Sit by the fire," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to emanate from somewhere near the earth's core. "I'll get you something warm to drink." Elena collapsed into a chair that dwarfed her, her whole body shaking as the warmth began to penetrate her chilled bones. She watched him move about the small kitchen area with surprising grace for someone so large. Everything about him seemed oversized: his hands, his movements. Even the simple act of preparing tea looked like a ritual performed by a gentle giant. He returned with a steaming mug of something that smelled like cinnamon and honey. "Drink slowly," he advised, settling into a chair across from her that creaked under his weight. The warmth spread through her chest as she sipped, and gradually the violent shaking subsided. "Thank you," she said, finally able to speak without her teeth chattering. "I thought I was going to die out there." "You might have," he said matter-of-factly. "This storm's going to last through the night, maybe longer." Elena glanced toward the window, where snow continued to pile against the glass. The wind howled around the cabin like something alive and angry. "I should try to call someone. My sister will be worried." "No signal up here during storms like this," he said. "And even if there was, no one's coming up that mountain tonight. You're stuck here until it passes." The reality of the situation settled over her. She was alone in a remote cabin with a complete stranger, a massive man who could easily overpower her without breaking a sweat. Yet something about his demeanor, the careful way he'd helped her, the gentle tone of his voice, made her feel safer than she had since the storm began. "I'm Elena," she said. "Marcus." He nodded toward her. "Hiking here. You're not equipped for this kind of weather." "I was just day hiking, taking photographs." The forecast said it would be clear. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "This is your home?" "Has been for 8 years." He gestured toward the walls lined with books and simple furnishings. "I prefer the solitude." As the evening wore on and the storm continued its assault on the mountain, Elena learned that Marcus was a former construction worker who'd left civilization behind after a workplace accident. had left him with chronic pain and a settlement that allowed him to disappear into the mountains. He'd built most of the cabin himself, lived simply, and rarely saw another human being from November through March. "Don't you get lonely?" Elena asked as they shared a simple dinner of bread, cheese, and soup he'd made from scratch. Marcus considered this for a long moment. "Loneliness and solitude aren't the same thing," he said finally. "I chose this." As night deepened and it became clear that Elena would need to stay until morning at the earliest, an awkward tension settled between them. The cabin had only one bed, a massive frame that Marcus had built for his oversized form. Elena found herself studying his profile in the firelight, noting the way his size made everything else seem miniature, including herself. "I can sleep by the fire," she offered, though the thought of leaving its warmth filled her with dread. "No," Marcus said firmly. "Too cold. The fire dies down at night." They looked at each other across the small space, both aware of the implications. Elena felt a flush of heat that had nothing to do with the flames. Despite the circumstances, or perhaps because of them, she was acutely aware of him as a man. There was something magnetic about his quiet strength, his gentleness despite his intimidating size. "I could share," she said quietly, the words coming out before she could stop them. "I mean, for warmth, body heat." Her cheeks burned. "I know. This is an unusual situation, and you've been nothing but kind to me. I don't want to impose further." Marcus went very still, his gray eyes studying her face intently. When he spoke, his voice was even gentler than before. "Elena, you don't owe me anything for helping you. Not anything." The way he said it with such quiet conviction made her realize how her offer must have sounded. Like payment. Like an obligation she felt she needed to fulfill in exchange for shelter. "That's not what I meant," she said quickly, though part of her wondered if it was. "At least partially. I know what you meant," Marcus interrupted softly. "And I know what you didn't mean. Either way, the answer is the same. You're safe here, and that's not conditional on anything." He stood and pulled thick blankets and furs from a chest. "I'll make you a warm nest by the fire. I've slept in worse places, and I run hot anyway." He began arranging the bedding with methodical care. "In the morning, when the storm passes, I'll take you back to the trail." Elena watched him work, something tight in her chest loosening. In a world where kindness often came with strings attached, where women learned to be wary of men's motivations, Marcus's simple decency felt revolutionary. "Why?" she asked. He looked up from the blankets. "Why what? Why help me without expecting anything in return?" Most people aren't trapped on a mountain with someone who could die," Marcus said. "And even if they were, basic human decency shouldn't be a transaction." He finished arranging her makeshift bed and stood, towering over her once more. "The storm's getting worse. You should try to sleep." Elena settled into the warm nest he'd created, cocooned in layers of wool and fur. The fire crackled beside her, and she could hear Marcus moving quietly around the cabin, checking the windows, adding logs to the fire, performing the small rituals of a man accustomed to taking care of himself and his space. When he finally settled into his own bed across the room, Elena found herself staring into the dancing flames and thinking about the strange turn her day had taken. She'd set out that morning to photograph autumn leaves and ended up learning something profound about human nature from a mountain hermit who looked like he could bench press a truck. "Marcus," she called softly into the darkness, "thank you. Not just for the shelter, for treating me like a person. Not like something you could take advantage of." His voice came back, warm and deep in the darkness. "Sleep well, Elena. The storm will pass," as she drifted off to the sound of wind and snow battering the cabin walls. Elena realized that some storms brought destruction, but others like this one brought unexpected gifts. Tomorrow she would return to her life in the valley, but she would carry with her the memory of a giant among men who proved that true strength was measured not in what you could take, but in what you chose to protect. The storm did pass, as Marcus had promised, and when morning came, the world was transformed into a crystal wonderland. He guided her back to the main trail, walking slowly so she could keep up with his massive strides. At the trailhead, where her car waited under 2 feet of snow, they stood in awkward silence. "I don't know how to thank you," Elena said. Marcus smiled the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. "Live well," he said simply. "That's thanks enough." As she drove away, Elena caught a last glimpse of him in her rearview mirror, a solitary figure,